Alright, this is part 2, which are the evens. Did the evens in class, so this will go a little bit quicker than the last video, because I already did this in class. Alright, remember when it says find the discriminant means that you are only doing the b squared minus 4ac part of your quadratic formula. You're not doing the whole thing. So remember, you're always supposed to have equals 0 before you even start anything. So that's why in class I subtracted by 2. So that means that a is 1, b is negative 5, and c is negative 2. So I plug it into the b squared minus 4ac formula. Negative 5 squared is 25. 4 times 1 times negative 2 is negative 8. So 25 minus negative 8 is 33. Based on this rule I said on the last video, if this is positive, that means I have 2 real solutions. Okay, the next one already equals 0. So I have a equals negative 1, b equals 3, and c equals negative 4. So I plug it into my b squared minus 4ac. 3 squared is 9. 4 times 4 times 1 is 16. And since these are both negative, it becomes positive 16. So it's 9 minus 16, which is negative 7. So that means I have 2 complex or imaginary solutions. Okay, last one. A equals 3, b equals negative 12, c equals 12, and I plug it in again. This is called plug and chug. Okay, negative 12 squared is 144. 4 times 3 times 12 is also 144. So 144 minus 144 is 0. So that means you have one real solution. Alright, so that's how you fill in that chart. You will get a chart like this on the test, so hopefully you'll know how to fill it out. Alright, we did this in class. But imagine if you were to break this up, you would have 5, 1a, and 2 x's. Here, if we divide this by 5, I wind up having 3 5s. Well, not 3 5s, really. It's 15, sorry. 2 a's and an x. So that means that I can divide both of these by 5. I have 1a in common and 1x. So after I divide, 5 divided by 5 cancels out, a divided by a cancels out, and I'm left with 1x, because x squared divided by x means you take away 1x. 15 divided by 5 is 3. The x's cancel out, and I'm left with 1a. And that's why that's the answer to the question. Okay, the next one had a little bit of controversy because you divided by 3, most of you. But remember, the leading coefficient inside a parenthesis should never be negative. The leading coefficient should be positive. So that's why we're going to make this factor negative. So we have negative 3. Divide both of these and you get x squared. 18 divided by negative 3 is negative 6. So that's why that's the answer. Be careful that you do not have this as your answer. This answer is technically wrong because inside a parenthesis should never have a leading coefficient be negative. If that was the case, we'd have a lot more negatives when we factor. Alright, this next section, I want to see what adds to give me negative 4 and what multiplies to give me 12. My factors of 12 are 6 times 2. But one of them has to be negative so that the 12 will be negative. So I'll make 6 negative. and test to see if that works. Negative 6 plus 2 is negative 4, so that works. Inside your parentheses go these numbers, not that. So x minus 6, x plus 2. Okay, next one, multiply first and last, and you get 20. So what multiplies to give you 20, and what adds to give you 9? The only time that happens is 4 and 5. 4 times 5 is 20. 4 plus 5 is 9. Since this is the Berry method, you're going to start off by putting a double 2x, because there's a 2x here. And usually squared means write it twice, right? So now I'm going to take this 4 and this 5 and put them in. If you notice, in the first one, they both are divisible by 2, so I can divide by 2. When I divide the first one by 2, I'm left with x plus 2. And the second one stays the same. So this is my answer. Okay, the next two are perfect squares, so I take the square root. So square root of x squared is x, square root of 49 is 7. So I'm left with x minus 7, but remember you should have two answers. So the other one would be x plus 7. Same thing with 14, take the square root, and I'm left with 4x minus 1. But remember you need two answers, so you'll also have 4x plus 1. Next one says solve by factoring, so you should factor. Since there's a minus in between, it's probably perfect squares. So I square root and I get x minus 3. Remember, you need two answers, so your other answer would be x plus 3. Set both of those factors equal to 0. So you're left with x equals 3 and x equals negative 3. So that's how you solve by factoring, making sure that you set both of your factors equal to 0. Okay, next one says solve by quadratic formula. So make sure you identify what's a, b, and c, and also make sure you see an equals 0. Okay, so remember the song is x equals negative b, so b is already negative, so it becomes positive, plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Once you put this in your calculator, it becomes 25 minus negative 48, which is, negative 96, which is 121. 121 is a perfect square, so it just equals 11, so you don't have to break it down twice. So x equals 5 plus or minus 11 over 2. So now if you split it up, 5 plus 11 is 16, divided by 2 is 8. 5 minus 11 is negative 6, divided by 2 is negative 3, making your answer 8 and negative 3. Okay, the next one says solve by any method, so you can do factoring or you can do quadratic formula. Make sure that it equals 0. Your equation should always say equals 0. This does not equal 0, so I make it equal 0. So now I see if I could factor. Do I have numbers that will multiply to give me 10 and add to give me negative 6? Let's see. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 plus 2 is 7. That doesn't work. 10 plus 1 is 11. 10 times 1 is 10. That doesn't work. So because factoring does not work, I'm going to have to use quadratic formula. Okay. So when it says any method, you could do whatever you want actually. So you didn't even need to factor if you didn't want to. But since we can't factor, we have to use the quadratic formula. So A is 2, B is -6, C is 5. So we do this again. X equals -b. Well, b is already negative, so I'll make that positive. Plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So when I work this out, I get 36 minus 40. Well, 36 minus 40 is -4. -4, you're not allowed to have negatives under the square root. This is a no-no. Right here. So we have to break it down to two factors. +4 and -1. The square root of 4 is a perfect square. That's equal to 2. The square root of -1 is equal to I. So that means that this answer now is 6 plus or minus 2i all over 4. Now, of course, this can be reduced. They're all divisible by 2, so I can divide everything by 2. So I'm left with x equals 3 plus or minus I over 2. Now, because there are two slots for your x's, you're just going to split it up. 3 plus I over 2, 3 minus I over 2. Okay, now for the back page, which are all the I pages. R plus S, so we have 5 plus 6i plus -2 plus I. Combine your like terms, that's equal to 3. And that's equal to 7. So your answer is 3 plus 7i. Okay, next one is s squared. So that's -2 plus I squared, which means write it twice. So because you guys love the box, I have -2 and I, -2 and I. So when I multiply, -2 times -2 is 4. -2 times I is -2i. -2 times I is -2i. And I times I is I squared. Put these two together, and it equals -4i. So I'm left with 4 minus 4i plus I squared. Remember, I squared equals -1. So I'm going to change this to -1. Combine my like terms one last time. So 4 minus 1 is equal to 3 minus 4i. Okay, so it's a lot of work, but remember each step. Okay, last page. We have R over S. So R is 5 plus 6i. S is -2 plus I. You must do the conjugate of the denominator, but the conjugate is only negating I. Do not touch the 2. Leave that alone. So we wind up having -2 stays the same. But what changes is it becomes minus I. Okay, so do not change the -2. So now we do the box. I'm going to box both of them for you. So I have 5 plus 6i times -2 minus I. So when you box it, you want to getting -2 times 5 is -10. 6 times -2 is -12. 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. And 6 times negative 1 is negative 6 with an I squared. So you can put these two together. Negative 12 and negative 5 is equal to negative 17. So when you write your numerator, you get negative 10 minus 17i minus 6i squared. Remember that I squared is equal to negative 1. So you want to change this whole thing to plus 6. So when you work it out, combine your like terms again. Negative 10 plus 6 is negative 4. The minus 17 stays the same. Now let's do the denominator. So I'm going to box that for you. So we have negative 2 plus I, negative 2 minus I. So you're left with negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. Negative 2 times I is negative 2I. Negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2I. And negative 1 times negative 1 is negative I squared. So remember, I squared equals negative 1. So put these two together. 2 plus negative 2 will give you 0. So that cancels out. So you're left with 4 minus I squared. Well, remember that I squared is equal to negative 1, so this becomes plus 1. Add these two together, you wind up getting 5. So my final answer is negative 4 minus 17i over 5. Remember, always put I last, except after radicals. Okay, so I has to come last except after radicals. Alright, 2 more questions and then we're done. Square root of negative 36. Remember, negative is a no-no. So we have square root of 36, square root of negative 1. This is equal to I. This is equal to 6. So the answer to this question will be 6i. Okay, the last one, if you break it down, you have square root of 16, which is 4. Square root of negative 1, which is I. So the first one is 4i. Second one, square root of 25, which is 5. And the square root of negative 1, which is I. So this is 5i. So 4i minus 5i equals negative 1i, which is simply equal to negative I. Alright, so that takes care of part 2 of the video. And here is your secret message. I will pass quarter 2. And I really believe all of you can pass if you study, come for help, and practice. Practice makes perfect. Perfect practice makes practice. Practicing perfect makes perfect practice. Makes you perfect. Ha! Say that 5 times fast. Alright, so here's the secret message. Okay, make sure that you pay attention to the secret message. And also, the very important part of the secret message is I need your emails. And remember, your emails will help me to set up a database so that I can send you guys videos, and so that if I need to send you an important message, and also if I'm going to be out. You know, sometimes we don't feel well, so if I'm going to be out, I can just send you a message on your email saying that I'm going to be out and what the expectations are for class. Everyone should have an email address. If not, I will help you set one up. We are now in the year 2011, so everyone should have email. And besides, if you have Facebook, you can't have one without an email anyway. Alright guys, thank you. and good luck on your test tomorrow.